brings together Buddhist studies, Jain studies, and Bharatiya Sanskriti Peetham, three institutions which were variously affiliated to Mumbai University and to Kavi Kulaguru Kalidas University at Ramtek. As you know, in August of 2019, we became a private university, and this allowed us enormous amount of freedom to structure ourselves and our programs in ways that are suitable to the community, and also sort of bring out the best that faculty can offer. And I do hope you will continue to participate in the programs going forward. And with this brief introduction, I will pass the baton to my colleague, Dr. Bhagyashree Baure, to formally introduce our speaker today. Bhagyashree, just a minute. Bhagyashree, can you take over?
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. It is my great pleasure to introduce Professor Mahesh Deokar. Professor Mahesh Deokar is currently the head at the Pali and Buddhist Studies Department in the Savitribai Phule Pune University. He completed his MA in Pali as well as Sanskrit and a PhD in Pali. Along with Pali and Sanskrit, he also has great command over the languages like Tibetan, Japanese, and German. The areas of his specialization and the research areas in which he works are comparative grammars of Pali and Sanskrit, Theravada Buddhism, contemporary Buddhism, translation, and editing. There are various projects which he has completed from his department, and there are few projects which are the ongoing projects. I would like to name few of them so that it will give audience the idea about the work that is being done. Some of the ongoing projects are Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit reader in Marathi, sources of the Buddha and his Dhamma, a critical edition with annotated English translation of the Karaka section of Moggalana Vutti Vivarana Panchika. And some of the projects which are already completed include preparation of a Pali-Marathi dictionary, a dictionary of Buddhist technical terms in Pali, Sanskrit, and Tibetan. I think these are very valuable and useful projects in the field of Buddhist studies. There are books to his credit. Some of the names I will read: Evam Me Sutam, Ekam Samayam Bhagava, Trisarana, Technical Terms and Technique of the Pali and the Sanskrit Grammars. The list is big. I will read only few of them. Deokar sir has guided 3 MPhil students and 4 PhD students have been awarded PhD under his guidance. Deokar sir has always been a mentor and has always encouraged all of us at the Center for Buddhist Studies, and I heartily welcome him here for this lecture, and I request Deokar sir to begin the talk. Madam, I may need to present his presentation, PPT.
Okay.
So,
is there something that's blocking you?
So I will try.
And Deokar sir, can you unmute yourself, please? Yeah, he's unmuted.
It says a host has to give.
Hang on, I'll just do that.
No, actually, I'm already unmuted. Okay. Yeah, so in fact, I was unmuted and I muted myself.
Oh, okay. Bhagyashree, is it possible now for you to share?
Yes.
Okay.
Is this visible?
Yeah.
Sir, you can begin your talk.
Do you want me also to turn on my video, or is that okay?
You can. Most welcome, sir. Would be nice to see you.
Not you can. I mean, you're sharing the PPT,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, but you can be visible on the side if you like, or you can.
No, I mean, okay. I think with this few glimpses, I can simply stop the video and then I can freely talk.
Okay, whatever suits you, sir. No problem.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, let me thank Dr. Supriya Rai and her team, especially Dr. Gautam More, who has invited me to give this talk a month ago, in fact. And I'm really happy to be here with all of you. In fact, as earlier it was decided that it will be a kind of a talk for the students of MA, but then I think it went on expanding and finally it became a public event. So anyhow, it's good because the same talk, and if more people can benefit, but my focus will be basically those students of MA who are kind of my target audience here, right? So thank you very much. And then I would also like to thank Somaiya Institute of Dharma Studies for organizing this and for inviting me to give this talk. In fact, when Gautam spoke about or gave me kind of a choice to talk on different topics, I chose the topic on Buddhaghosa for one simple reason. I mean, and that is that few days ago, not few days, we should say few months ago, I was asked by the Asiatic Society of Mumbai to write an introduction to a monograph which was initially published by the Asiatic Society in 1946, where Bimal Charan Law, he wrote about Buddhaghosha, his life and works. And that important monograph, the society wanted to republish. And in this republication, they wanted to add some kind of a introduction. And I accepted it with, again, a selfish motive of getting an opportunity to study Buddhaghosha and modern research on Buddhaghosa. And it was quite a fruitful endeavor. And finally, I wrote a small introduction to the book, which is reprinted by the Asiatic Society of Mumbai recently. The book, I mean, my contribution in that book also includes bibliography of study on Buddhaghosa. Basically, it covers the major works, editions, translations, and then research on Buddhaghosa and about his contribution. So with this background, I thought that it would be easier probably to talk on this topic. And as we all know that in the field of Pali studies, Buddhaghosha is an important figure, and we all are indebted to him for such a enormous contribution which he has made through his Buddha Vishuddhimaga and the Nikaya commentaries. I think without those commentaries, it would have been impossible to study Pali canon. And scholars like Law has really said that Buddhaghosha holds the same position as sayana to the Vedic tradition. So this really tells us about the importance of Buddhaghosa in the field of Pali studies. So my talk today will basically take an overview of Buddhaghosa's life, and then it will basically also talk about Buddhaghosa's works, and in the end I will talk about some kind of direction, modern direction to the study on Buddhaghosa. The first slide, when we talk about the early studies on Buddhaghosa, actually the formal study on Buddhaghosa began in 1921 with Elphinot's work in French, La Légende de Buddhaghosa. And then immediately after that, after 3 years, P.C. Bakshi actually presented an English translation of the same work by Finot under the title The Legend of Buddhaghosa, which was published in 1924 in Calcutta. Thereafter, in 1928, we know that G.P. Malalsekara wrote his important work on the Pali literature of Ceylon, which was published in 1928, right? Thereafter, we should talk about A.P. Buddhadutta Mahathera, who wrote a book called Who Was Buddhaghosa? And it was published in 1944 for the first time. Another important work is E.W. Adikaram's Early History of Buddhism in Ceylon, which was published in 1946. And this is an important work, and it really still is valuable to understand the history of Buddhism in Ceylon in the early period. The last one which I would like to mention here in this connection is B.C. Law's Buddhaghosa, which was published in 1946, which I have just mentioned, and I had a fortune to write that to this book in the form of a bibliographical survey of research on Buddhaghosa. Okay, so with this, basically the curiosity began about Buddhaghosa, his life and his work. And this early works kind of laid down the foundation for the research which has taken place in last 7 or more decades. I mean, I would request, or I would like to kind of recommend the students to really read these books in order to understand, in order to get some more details about Buddhaghosa and his work. Okay, now we'll go to the next slide where we talk about Buddhaghosa's life, and legends surrounding it. It is indeed it's a challenging job to know or to discern the historical facts about Buddhaghosa, because whatever is available to us is on one hand it's very meager, it's very short, and sometimes the larger accounts which we have about Buddhaghosa, they are really, I mean, colored with lots of fancy and imagination. So it's really very difficult to discern some factual information about Buddhaghosa from such materials. Now, if you look at the traditional material, what do we have? What are the sources which we can look at? Now, the first, I mean, apart from Buddhaghosa's own introductions which he wrote to his works, in the form of the nidanas, or these introductory stanzas which he composed, and the nigamanas, the epilogues, which he has, which are there at the end of each of his work. They are the very important and most reliable sources, but they don't really give you much information about his career, about his persona, about any of the other personal details. So for that, we have to turn to these traditional sources, and they include, the first one is the Mahavansa II. That means this extended version of Mahavansa, which is also known popularly as Chulavansa, composed by Dhammakitti in the 13th century. That is the first source which we can look at. The second source is the Saddhamma Sangaha by Dhammakitti Mahasami, who was also flourished in the in 13th century, and this is also an important work, information about Buddhaghosa's life. The third important work is Buddhaghosupatti, composed in the 15th century by a Venerable Mahamangala, most probably in Siam. Then the next one which we have is the Gandhavansa, composed by Burmese monk scholar Nanda Panya. Yeah. And this is an important work as well. And then final is the Panyaratana, who composed the Sasanavansa in 1861. So these are some of the traditional sources which we can look at for getting some information about Buddhaghosa. But as you see, these sources are kind of late date. If you look at even the Chulavansa, the first historical record which we get there, there is a gap of almost 900 years between Buddhaghosa and these works, right? So they tell us various accounts, wonderful stories. So there must be some kind of history behind them, around which these stories and legends grew. But it's really difficult to tell with certainty about Buddhaghosa on the basis of these works, right? Yeah. Now let's move on to some of the personal details or history which we can gather from these different sources, right? These traditional sources. Okay, now the very first question which bothers us is the age or the time when Buddhaghosha flourished, when he composed his works. And the most accepted date for Buddhaghosha's flourish is the reign of Mahanama, right, which is the first half of the 5th century. And the Mahanama's dates are usually given as 409 to 431. 409 to 431 Common Era. Now, this Mahanama, is also kind of known by a few other names. Scholars have kind of identified Mahanama with King Srinivasa, who is actually referred to in the epilogue of Samantapasadika, and the Sirikuta, who is referred to in the Dhammapada Atakata epilogue. BC law also kind of puts him in the reign of Gotabaya Abhaya, which is early 4th century. But modern scholars such as Oscar von Hinneber, he has not accepted this view, and he has rather proposed a date between 370 to 450 Common Era as a possible date for Buddhaghosha. based on different cross-references and identifications which are done by with the scholars. So that's what we can say about his date. Now, if we look at his early life and education, it is believed that, I mean, there are two accounts. According to the Chulavansa and Buddhaghosapatti and Sasanavansa, these texts, Buddhaghosa was born somewhere near Bodh Gaya, in the village called Ghosa, yeah, and into a Brahmin family. I mean, we don't know how far this is true, but yes, I mean, mostly, I mean, such learned people, they are always associated with some Brahmanic roots. So similarly, he is also considered to be a person born in a Brahmin family, and Chulavansa, of course, doesn't talk about his parents and so on, but it does mention that he was well versed in the Patanjali's yoga and the Sankhya philosophy, and it then also reports Buddhaghosa kind of meeting with Venerable Revata, and then Buddhaghosa converting to Buddhism, accepting the Pravraja and the Revata, and finally composing the two texts before going to Ceylon, and that is Jnanodaya and Attasalini. Of course, these are said again by scholars. About Jnanodaya, I mean, Oscar von Hinneberg, I mean, has speculates that this may be connected somehow with the Jnana Katha of Patisambhidamagga, which we can also see its reflection of the Patisambhidamagga in Vishuddhimaga's Panya section as well. So on the basis of that, Hinneberg thinks that this Jnanodaya may be something which is connected, a text may be connected with Patisambhidamagga. About Attasalini, of course, nobody accepts that it's the same Attasalini which we have now. At the most, scholars believe that this might be some kind of a commentary, Kacha, that is Kathya, exposition on Dhammasangini, which he might have wrote with the same title, but then maybe it is not the same commentary as we have it now. So it must have been some kind of preliminary work or notes which were written by Buddhaghosa. Apart from that, we don't really have much in the Chulavansa. If we turn to Buddhaghosapatti, it is more legendary in nature, and it gives you this full account of Buddhaghosa's birth in a Brahmin family, and his parents Kesi and Kesini, and who were the priests, Purohitas, actually the kingly priests of the king of Bodh Gaya, and then how he mastered the Vedas in a very early age, and then how he had interaction with the Buddhist monk who actually initially was really worried about how can people, because he saw that there is no one who can teach them so, and people really cannot understand the Buddha Vachanas. So he thought of requesting some deva to be born, and then he actually surveys the heavens and locates that there is a Devaputta called Ghosa, who is in the heaven right now, and then he goes there and requests him to take birth, which he accepts, and then he's born in the womb of Kesini as this young boy, the young Brahmin boy, who masters the Vedas, and then has this interaction with the Buddhist monks. And the story which is told here is very much online with the story of Nagasena. Nagasena's early childhood, his birth, and so on. I mean, those who have studied Milinda Panya amongst you will remember that we have a similar story about how Nagasena was born. It's again the same, like how the elder Asagutta goes to heaven, requests this deity to take birth on the earth, and then finally this boy born brown in the Brahmin family meets Rohana, and then Rohana converts him. So it's kind of a similar storyline which we find in Buddhaghosa Patti about the Buddhaghosa. Later on, it also reports another incidents where he talks about like how how to Buddhism. So this meeting with Rohana, as we have in the Nagasena story, we have a similar story also in the account of Mauliputta Tissatera, the chief monk of the third. That story has lots of parallel with the story of Mauliputta Tissa. So all these things in fact point to the fact that these stories have no historical truth behind them, but they are more legendary in nature, right? Okay, now what actually we gather from Buddhaghosha's own writings, the epilogues and the introductions which he wrote to his own own works like Vishuddhimaga and the Nikaya commentaries, is that he had some strong connections with South India. It is in fact reported that he was born in a village called Moranda Chetaka or Moranda, several versions of it, which some scholars kind of try to identify with a place, with a village in the vicinity of Nagarjuna Konda and Amaravati. So there are these two villages, Gundapalli and I think Nemali. So Gundapalli means under, egg, and Nemali means peacock. So Moranda is like the peacock's egg. So so they try to identify this. So this might be the birthplace which Buddhaghosa himself has actually referred to in his epilogue of Vishuddhimaga, where it is said that he should be referred to as someone belonging to that village. So that might be the birthplace of Buddhaghosa in South India. Then we also get references to Buddhaghosha's career in South India, and where we see that he wrote this Majjhima Nikaya commentary on the request of Buddhamitta, who was the resident of what is called as Mayura Rupa Pattana. I mean, it is said to be a kind of a marketplace or a place important for the trade in the Kaveri Delta, and it has been also identified with some villages, some places in South India, and similarly we also get a reference to Kanchipuram. Actually, the commentaries on the Samyutta Nikaya and on the Anguttara Nikaya were composed on the request of Venerable Jyotipala, who was in the Kanchipuram, that is Kanchipuram, in South India. We also kind of get reference that Buddhaghosa finally traveled to Ceylon from most probably from the Nagapattinam port, which we get from the these ancient sources, where the name Nagapattinam is kind of occurs in a bit corrupt form. I mean, these facts, in fact, show that Buddhaghosa had a strong connection with South India. And although the traditional sources refer to him as the person from Magadha, from near Bodh Gaya, I mean, his real career, as we can see from his own works, seems to have flourished in early career, at least in South India. Now, Buddhaghosa, when he went to Sri Lanka, before writing Vishuddhimaga, it has been reported that actually he studied the old commentaries, the old Sinhala commentaries under Sanghapala, who ultimately was impressed with his erudition, his scholarship, and requested him to write Vishuddhimaga. Now, Vishuddhimaga, as scholars have shown, is kind of a Theravada or a Mahavihara response to Vimuttimaga, composed by Upatissa and from the Abhayagiri tradition. Now, in all Buddhaghosha's works, we get lots of information, lots of stories, persons, place names belonging to Sri Lanka. So all these different details about Sri Lanka are all over in Buddhaghosha's works, in his commentaries. He talks about the Ceylonese kings. He talks about all the different monks in different places, and so many stories, vattus, with which his commentaries are full. However, scholars have kind of studied them very closely, and what they have discovered ultimately is that most of them, which of course they could date, they are not really contemporary to Buddhaghosa's own time, and they were from the time of Emperor Ashoka up to the 2nd century Common Era. So mostly it is believed that whatever Buddhaghosha is basically reporting us, all the stories and places and people from Sri Lanka, these probably are kind of some information which he got from the Sinhala commentaries, and they were not his own kind of personal experiences, because he lived in early 5th century. So his knowledge of Sri Lanka and all these stories which we find, actually they seem to be kind of included in his works through the Sinhala Atakata, the traditional Sinhala commentaries. Yeah. So okay. Now this very fact that Buddhaghosha was requested by Sanghapala, and that Buddhaghosha studied these Sinhala commentaries under Sanghapala before writing Vishuddhimaga, it is quite clear that he had access to all this material before writing Vishuddhimaga. So sometime, we are being told that he went to Sri Lanka, and then they gave him these 2 verses from Samyutta Nikaya, Sile Patithaya Narosapanyo, and so on, and asked him to write the commentary on these 2 stanzas, which kind of ended up in a Buddhaghosa's important work, Vishuddhimaga. But the Vishuddhimaga itself is a proof. There are so many internal evidences in Vishuddhimaga itself, which clearly show us that Buddhaghosha was well versed, or he had access to all the Sinhalese commentaries and material which he had used, in fact, for composing Vishuddhimaga. Now, after composing, Vishuddhimaga and these other commentaries, they say after completing his job, he went back to India and spent his last days. That's what the traditional sources tell us, that he spent his last days somewhere in Gaya. There are some other sources, Burmese sources, which tell us that actually Buddhaghosa, after Sri Lanka, he went to Burma, and then he did translate some of the other things. He also took Kachana grammar and so on. There are so many legendary stories there. And then some Cambodian sources also tell that Buddhaghosa, in fact, spent his last days in Cambodia. in one of the viharas there. But anyway, I mean, these are the stories, and we really don't have much information about what happened to him. But the early traditional sources tell us that Buddhaghosa passed away peacefully in Bodh Gaya, and there they erected a stupa in his memory. But of course, we don't have any archaeological evidences to prove this. Yeah. Okay. Now, if we come to Buddhaghosa's works, now the very first work which earned him the fame was Vishuddhimaga. I already mentioned that Buddhaghosa basically adopted this text using the same model which Vimuktimarga had used, and that is this Sila Samadhi Panya, Sila Samadhi Panya trio, which he used as a basis to explain the entire Tipitaka. And this is kind of said to be the encyclopedia of Pali Tipitaka, which kind of has the essence of the entire Tipitaka and the Theravada ideology. Apart from that, Buddhaghosa has written the 4 different commentaries on the 4 Nikayas. I think all of you already know about them. His commentary on the Digha Nikaya is known as Sumangala Vilasini. Yeah? Sumangala Vilasini means something which is a sport, and it's something which is pleasant for the Sumangala. Now, this commentary was written at the request of Venerable Dathanaga, who was a resident of Sumangala Pirivena. So Sumangala Monastery. We don't know the exact location of this Pirivena, but he was a chief monk who requested Buddhaghosa to write Sumangala Vilasini. And now this also explains quite clearly why the commentary is called Sumangala Vilasini, because this was written for Venerable Dathanaga, who was a resident of Sumangala Pirivena. So, and we don't know, even he might have even written this commentary staying in the same monastery. The second commentary which he wrote on Majjhima Nikaya is called Papancha Sudani, that which destroys the Papancha, the Sansara. And this was composed on the request of Venerable Buddhamitta, which we have just mentioned sometime before, from the Mayuru Rupapattana, this market town in South India, which is also identified with Mailapuram or Mayavaram in South India. So the Saratapakasini is the third commentary. Saratapakasini means the illuminator of the essential meaning, which is a commentary on the Samyutta Nikaya, which he composed on the request of Venerable Jyotipala from Kanchipuram. But it seems that from the next commentary, that is Manoratha Purani on the Anguttara Nikaya, and Manoratha Purani means it is something like fulfillment of one's desire. So which is a commentary on the Anguttara Nikaya, which Buddhaghosa wrote on the request of the same Venerable Jyotipala, and also on the request of one Jivaka, who was of the Mahavihara. And he is said to be a layperson somehow. And just a minute. Something went wrong here. Just a minute. Yeah, sorry. So, so this last commentary, Manoratha Purani, which he also wrote at the request of the Jyotipala, and it seems so law actually suspects that the same Jyotipala who requested him to write a commentary on the Samyutta Nikaya, also took Buddhaghosa to Sri Lanka, to Mahavihara, and he was also instrumental in kind of requesting Buddhaghosa to compose this fourth commentary on the Anguttara Nikaya, called Manurutapurani. Now, apart from this, I mean, apart from Vishuddhimaga and these four commentaries on the four Nikayas, the tradition also ascribes other commentaries. I mean, and Gandhamata is prominent. It ascribes altogether 12 works to Buddhaghosa. Now, this includes the two commentaries on the Vinaya Pitaka, called Samantapasadika, which is the commentary on the Vinaya Pitaka, and then Kankhavitarani, which is a commentary on the Patimokkha. So this Samantapasadika has been said to be composed on the request of Buddha Siddhi, who was in Sri Lanka, and then the Kankhavitarani was composed on the request of one Sonathera. We don't know to which place he belonged, but these two commentaries, which we have the Vinaya, and then if you look at the commentaries here, I mean, in the Samantapasadika, we see a kind of a particular model which is adopted for writing this commentary. So Buddhaghosa, in a verse, he gives a kind of gives this principle. So there are these questions. I mean, we see the similar style also at the beginning of the Vishuddhimaga. So when Vishuddhimaga begins, Buddhaghosa also lays down his methodology of how he's going to write the commentary on each topic, and on the basis of some questions. So why, for example, in terms of Shila, he says, okay, why Shila is so called? What are its ties? What are its subcategories? How the Shila is purified? How it is defiled, and so on and so forth. So he has some kind of questions. What are the rasa, pachupatthana, and etc. of Shila, and so on. So he takes some kind of questions, and then as an answer to these questions, the whole topic is explained. So in the same way, in the Samantapasadika, we also see a similar model where a particular topic is explained with the help of certain questions, and these questions are like by whom it was said, and when it was said, right, and for what reason it was said. I mean, there are this kind of set of questions which I have given in the slide. So I mean, there are these different questions asked, and as answers to this question, the entire Vinaya is explained, right? So so this was a methodology which was adopted in writing Samantapasadika. It also follows this other method of Sutta, Suttanuloma, and Acharyavada, and the last is this one's own mind, Athanomati. So actually, the Sutta is basically to see the actual Vinaya Pitaka and its text. When we talk about Suttanuloma, it is basically referring to the referring to the four Mahapadesas. I mean, the way the ways or the principles which are given in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta for deciding what is the authentic teaching of the Buddha. And then after that, we also have this after Sutta Suttanuloma, we have Acharyavada. These are the views of the Acharyas which are in conformity with Sutta and Suttanuloma. And finally, one's own views, which are accepted only when they are in conformity with the earlier three principles. So these are the four principles on the basis of which the commentary is written. So Sutta, Suttaloma, Sutta, Acharyavada, and Athanomati. Yeah. Okay. Now, if we look at the Abhidharma Commentaries, there are three Abhidharma Commentaries. The first one is Attasalini, the commentary which is rich in the meaning. Before that, of course, the Samantapasadika means something which is entirely kind of pleasing. And Kankavitarani, as we can see, that it means something which helps to overcome doubts. And so Attasalini is a common meaning. Then on the Vibhanga, we have the commentary called Samoha Vinodani, Dispeller of Doubts. And the remaining 5 Abhidharma treatises, I mean, they have a common commentary called Panchapakarana Atakata, or simply Pakarana Atakata. So these 5 Pakaranas, the 5 sections, I mean, they have a single commentary. Now, if we, I mean, all these commentaries, they have been also ascribed to Buddhaghosa, and in fact, if we look at their colophons, what we find is that they were composed at the request of some Buddhaghosa Yati, yeah, or we'll talk about this shortly. That scholars actually don't agree that these were composed by Buddhaghosa himself, but it is said that they were composed by some of the disciples of Buddhaghosa under his supervision. Anyhow, so these 3 commentaries on the Abhidharma Pitaka, they are also ascribed to Buddhaghosa. In the Khuddaka Nikaya, we have the Kudakapata Commentary, which is called Paramattha Jyotika. Then the Sutta Nipata Commentary, which is in fact anonymous. I mean, if you look at the text itself, no name is given there, but it's the only tradition which also calls it Paramattha Jyotika. So we call it Paramattha Jyotika 2, which is a commentary on the Sutta Nipata. And then we have the commentary on the Dhammapada called Dhammapada Atakata, and the commentary on the Jaṭaka called Jaṭakatha Varnana or Jaṭakatha Katha. And actually, Gandhavansa also ascribed the Apadana commentary to Buddhaghosa. Of course, which scholars have later on shown that, I mean, it is impossible because Apadana Atakata refers to Theravada Atakata and Therigata Atakata, which are composed later by Dhammapala, right? So that has been kind of rejected. So if you look at the modern scholarship and how they kind of look at it, because in the initial research on Buddhaghosa, it was mainly focused on Buddhaghosa's authorship of different texts. So that has been a kind of very important topic for the modern scholarship. So K.R. Norman is of the opinion that he says that except the Apadana commentary, he says that all other commentaries are actually written by Buddhaghosa. So he more or less ascribes, I mean, all these texts, all these commentaries to Buddhaghosa himself. So K.R. Norman has argued about this in his history of Indian literature, or his volume on the Pali literature in 1883. But Oscar von Hinüber, another important scholar, and who is actually someone who has written extensively and on Buddhaghosa, and I think he's a scholar who has studied Buddhaghosa the most. So Oscar von Hinüber, in his Handbook of Pali Literature, 1996, he says that we can only safely accept Buddhaghosa's authorship of the 4 texts of which are the commentaries on the Nikayas plus Vishuddhimaga, but the rest, he says, are doubtful. I mean, according to him, they are basically probably composed on close dependence on Buddhaghosa's the Nikaya commentaries and Vishuddhimaga, but they are probably composed under his supervision. I mean, by a team of scholars, because I mean, he says that if you really collect all these pages of commentary literature which we have, it is more than 7,000 pages. And he thinks that it is an impossible task for a single person to do it. So, I mean, there is this theory which is also accepted by some other scholars like Jnanatiloka and Nanamoli. They think that Buddhaghosa basically worked in a team, and he had to kind of assign some of the duties of writing commentaries with to some of his junior scholars, and they had kind of use some kind of material like stock blocks of the commentarial stuff written on some kind of palm leaves, like on the patrikas, and which they all use. So in order to achieve some kind of standardization, this kind of policy was adopted, and therefore we see that in the Nidana part, what we find in the Jataka Nidana or in the Abhidhamma Nidana and in the Samantapasadika and so on, there is such a close kind of uniformity and consistency in explanation. And they think that this is a result of such kind of use of such slips or patrikas on commentary, or the explanation of certain points were actually written down, and then they were circulated. So if I want to write something about in some other book on the same topic, I would just use that material and will insert it in my own commentary in this work. So in this way, I mean, they believe that Buddhaghosa worked in a team, and he actually did not himself write all these commentaries, but I mean, except the 4 Nikaya commentaries, that he did not write all the other commentaries, but he simply supervised them. Now, when we look at the now let's look at this kind of commentaries one by one. I mean, we can see that in the case of the Vinaya commentaries, the scholars who refute the authorship of Buddhaghosa of these 2 commentaries, I mean, apart from Oscar von Uniberg, they include B.C. Law himself. I mean, according to B.C. Law proposes this theory of 3 different Buddhaghoshas. I mean, the Buddhaghosa 1, basically the great Buddhaghosa, he calls him great Buddhaghosa, the author of the Vishuddhimaga and the 4 Nikaya commentaries. Then there's Buddhaghosa 2, who is the author of Paramattha Jyotika 1 and 2, and Dhammapada Atakata and Jataka Atakata. And then, according to him, the author of the Samantapasadika was Buddhaghosa 3. According to Oscar von Heuneberg, I mean, Samantapasadika was actually, as he said, redacted. I mean, so there was some kind of earlier material, of course, as we know, in the Sinhala commentaries. And Samantapasadika and Kankavitarani kind of they were redacted by different people under the supervision of I mean, probably under the supervision of Buddhaghosa, but I mean, they were doing this independently. They were just redacting material from the earlier sources, and the main aim, as we can see from the introduction in the Samantapasadika, that they really wanted to make this Vinaya material available in Pali, in Magadhi, so that it can spread outside Sri Lanka. It can become more global in that sense. So yeah, now I mean, the grounds on which they kind of reject Buddhaghosa authorship of Samantapasadika includes a fact that, I mean, the style, I mean, of the introduction of the Samantapasadika and Kankavitarani is quite different from the other commentaries on the 4 Nikayas and the Vishuddhimaga. Secondly, his commentarial method in the Nikaya commentaries and the Vinaya commentaries is also substantially different. We don't have much time to discuss all the individual cases, but one should refer and read Oscar von Ingeber's kind of work in this regard, and also the work by Petra Kiefer-Puels. Another important factor which makes it quite distinct is that in Samantapasadika, the commentator has included many differing views which come from the non-Viharan tradition or from some South Indian earlier sources. Now, we don't really see this happening in the Nikaya commentaries. Nikaya commentaries only stick to the views of the Mahavihara, and they don't really take into account the other competing views or the controversies regarding any sutta matter or the so. But in the Vinaya commentary, in the Samantapasadika, we do find this included. So we have different commentary, like the Andaka commentaries were included for the sake of refutation only. And we also see views recorded from the non-Mahavihara scholars and traditions. And the controversies also regarding some Vinaya matters are also discussed in the Samantapasadika. So based on this, scholars believe that Samantapasadika and Kankavitarani are kind of composed by two different authors, and they were not, of course, Buddhaghosa. At the most, we can say that they were closely linked, of course, closely related to Vishuddhimaga and other Nikaya commentaries, but there are also quite remarkable differences in the two. And therefore, at the most, we can say that this was something project of redaction of the older sources done under the supervision of Buddhaghosa. Now, in the case of Abhidharma Commentaries, there is a good number of scholars who actually reject Buddhaghosha's authorship of Abhidharma Commentaries. We know that Athasalini, the edition of which was first prepared by P.V. Bapat and R.D. Vadekar. This is still considered to be the best edition of Athasalini with their wonderful introduction. So they also reject this idea that of Buddhaghosha's authorship of Athasalini. Apart from them, we also have like N. Jayavikrama, Al-Kazin, O.H. Pind. So all these scholars, they also kind of reject Buddhaghosha's authorship of Athasalini, and other and also Nyanamoli on the other commentaries, not just Athasalini, but even these other commentaries on the Abhidharma Pitaka. Now, it seems that especially P.V. Bapat in his introduction has shown that often the description or the explanation given in Athasalini of certain matters differs from the interpretation given in the Vishuddhimaga. Structurally, also the commentary, the Athasalini is kind of composed in a different way, different manner, as compared to the other commentaries of Buddhaghosha. Now, if you look at the Khuddaka Nikaya commentary, the situation is still more problematic. As I already mentioned, the law, basic law, accepts Buddhaghosa II, Chula Buddhaghosa, who, according to him, wrote Paramattha Jyotika 1 and 2, because there are also kind of differences here in Paramattha Jyotika and the other Nikaya commentaries. According to other scholars like Adhikaram, Vikunyanamoli, they and of course Oscar von Ingeber, they have all doubted the authorship of Buddhaghosa of Paramattha Jyotika 1 and 2. Similarly, the authorship of Buddhaghosa of Jaṭā Katha and Dhammapadartha Katha is also rejected. Now, these are the only commentaries which don't have any independent title, such like other commentaries of ascribed to Buddhaghosa. And the nature of these two commentaries is quite different. They are stories linked with some stanzas, verses. In case of Dhammapada, there is a stanza, and then to explain the stanza or to kind of in support of the stanza, a story is told. Whereas in the case of the Jaṭā Atakata, we have a story, and within the story, the stanzas are included. I mean, they are incorporated. But I mean, the style of these two commentaries is so different. I mean, they are rather a narrative. I mean, texts belonging to the narrative rather than a commentary genre, because the commentary part in these commentaries is so small as compared to the narrative part. Scholars have also kind of spotted differences in the narratives which are found in the Dhammapad Atakata or Jataka Atakata, and the same narratives quoted elsewhere in the Nikaya commentaries. So on the basis of that, yeah, I mean, the scholars have rejected the view that these were also composed by Buddhaghosa. Okay, so after this kind of issue of authorship of Buddhaghosa, let us turn to the development of the Atakata literature in general. So if we look at, I mean, the history of Pali commentarial tradition, we can see that I mean, the early traces of Pali commentaries can be seen in, for example, in the Majjhima Nikaya, we have Bhaddekaratta Sutta, which, according to Huniber, kind of have the early sources, early traces of the commentary in the Pali tradition. Then, of course, we have in the Vinaya, we have Sutta Vibhanga. Now, Vibhanga itself means a commentary or analysis. This is an older term which is used for commentary. And in the Nikayas too, we find texts such as like Paticcasamuppada Sutta and then Paticcasamuppada Vibhanga Sutta. So we have even Vibhanga Suttas, which are like commentaries or expositions on certain other suttas. So apart from that, in the Dhammasa, in the Abhidharma itself, we have the text called Vibhanga, which is also a kind of a commentary. Then Nidesa is well known, which is a canonical commentary, the only text which is a commentary, in fact, but has got a status of a canonical text, which is a commentary on the last two chapters of Sutta Nipata, along with the Khaggavisana Sutta. Now, after that, when we look at Buddhaghosha's commentaries, we see that Buddhaghosha in his commentaries has some kind of references to what went before him, because after Nidesa, after the canonical text, then we really have a gap, a long gap of more than 400-500 years, where we don't find any text. The only record which we find is that, okay, when Mahinda went to Ceylon, he also took with him the commentaries which were then kind of translated into Sinhalese. And this is how we got the Sinhalese commentaries. But they say that he had some commentaries. But that's all. Maybe that's all we have. But we don't really know anything more than this. Now, if we look at Buddhaghosha's own writing, he refers to Puranas. Yeah, the ancient. I mean, the older scholars, or maybe the ancient ones, which he calls Puranas, the old scholars. I mean, so there are kind of quotations and views ascribed to these Puranas, or even sometimes their views are also quoted in a versified form. Then Buddhaghosha also refers to the Bhanakas. So he sometimes kind of talks about a particular view held by the Diga Bhanakas, and particular view held by the Vinayadharas, and so on and so forth. So he's referring to some kind of an oral tradition of the Bhanakas and their views or opinions on certain matters. Then he also talks about Atakatacharyas. Now, when Buddhaghosha says Atakatacharyas, they probably refer to this old Sinhalese Atakatas and the masters, I mean, who are the composed or who kind of upheld these old Sinhala commentaries. So, I mean, he refers to some teachers, of course, Atakatacharyas, and he also refers to some Atakatas. Now, these Atakatas which he refers to, as you all know, I mean, they include Kurundi, Mahapachari, Sihala Atakata, Maha Atakata, Sankhepa Atakata, and Andhaka Atakata. So the Andhaka Atakata basically refers to the commentary from the Andhakas, that is the Andhra Buddhists of South India, and Pachari. Vajra Buddhi also refers to Chula Pachari, and now it might be is quite possible that this Pachari and Chula Pachari are one and the same text. So there was Mahapachari and there was Chula Pachari. So all these kind of different commentaries are referred to by Buddhaghosa by name in his commentary. So these were the kind of sources which Buddhaghosa was using for writing his commentary. So he was in a way using all this earlier material and trying to be faithful to the Mahavihara tradition, as he said. And he avoided as far as possible his own views. And wherever he has mentioned them with caution. And he said, okay, for on such and such section, we don't really have any material available in the tradition. So this is my own commentary. He has also mentioned Nagasena, so that means Milinda Panya, and he has mentioned the views of Nagasena. At certain point, he has also mentioned Mahakachayana views, and he has also referred to the canonical commentaries which were available to him. So these were the different sources which Buddhaghosa used, and this also shows like how the whole commentary tradition developed right from the canonical period up to Buddhaghosa's own work. Now, if you come to look at Buddhaghosa's the language, the type of language which he uses, it's a wonderful, graceful Pali with, it shows kind of a new era of Pali literature. So often many of the archaic forms are kind of explained by Buddhaghosa using, let's say, more modern forms. So, whenever you see a commentary, for example, he will say such and such word means such and such. And then what he does is that he basically replaces the old archaic form with a new form. So with the help of this, you can really notice, or you can really understand which were the archaic forms and which are the more modern forms based on Buddhaghosa's comments. Buddhaghosa has this wonderful narrative style. So, even in texts like Vishuddhimaga, where often he quotes or cites some stories, and there you can see that there is a narrator hidden in him. He has also kind of given some kind of some of the stanzas, verses. For example, he has these stanzas about the praise of Sila, Nisamsa, and so on. Now, we don't know whether these stanzas were actually traditionally were there or Buddhaghosa himself composed it. If Buddhaghosa himself composed them, then we can say that, okay, he also had a kind of poetic skill. Apart from that, of course, in a commentarial exposition, he is very precise, very accurate, and he really shows a great understanding about the language, etymology, and the semantics of Pali. Of course, as B.C. Law observes, in Vishuddhimaga, his style is more you can say pedantic, more dense, more more technical as compared to his style in the Nikayas. In the Nikayas, it is more lucid and more charming. So now, if we turn to his commentarial methodology and his textual methodology, what we can see is that this is an important opinion of Professor Huber. He said that Buddhaghosa acted simultaneously as an author, as a compiler, as a redactor, as an editor, and also as a textual critique. So, he has played different roles. So, this very sentence it's a very telling statement because it tells you what Buddhaghosa was doing with the material. Yeah, so there were things which he were kind of writing, which were, we can say, originally his own, but at the same time, he was also compiling data from different sources. He was redacting material from the earlier commentaries, right? And whatever material was available, he was also editing them, because he talks about, like, some of these old commentaries, they have lots of repetitions and so on some mistakes. So he removed them. He tried to make them flawless, all right? So he's also doing some kind of editing work. And he was a textual and literary critique as well, because he gives his own comments on some of these textual interpretations. So Buddhaghosa, I mean, he has referred to these three different nayas, three different methods available to him. And these are the Pali Naya, the Atakata Naya, and the Acharya Naya. Yeah. Now, out of these, I mean, the Pali Naya means the methods which were available in the canonical texts. Atakata Naya is a method which is available in the commentaries. When you say commentaries, of course, this refers to that earlier commentaries, Sinhala Atakatas. And then the Acharya Naya means the method of different teachers. Now, of course, Buddhaghosa gives importance to the first two, and does not give so much importance to the Acharya teachings. So he said that he want to be very faithful to the tradition and faithful to the Mahavihara ideology, right? Now, I mean, if you look at his commentarial method in general, I mean, of course, we are kind of rushing through because of want of time, and there is lots of things to discuss. What he does is he basically says that his commentary is Atthavarnana. I mean, what he does is he explains the meaning of each word. So basically, it's a semantic analysis, right? So it's a word-to-word semantic analysis which he follows. That's a major feature of his commentary. For the same, I mean, interestingly, in the Abhidharma Commentaries, we have the word padabhajani instead of atthavarnana. So the term uses padabhajani. I mean, this is a different technical term employed in the Abhidharma Commentaries. Okay, so but this is the first common method, we can say, commentarial method which Buddhaghosa adopts. Buddhaghosa also presents linguistic analysis, and he also discusses some of the constructions in the Tipitaka, and for that, I mean, scholars say that he often relies on maybe rules in Paninian grammar of Sanskrit, or recently Alistair Gornell has suggested that there might be some kind of commentary which is not available to us on the Paninian tradition, which he might be using. But I mean, we are not really sure about what kind of basis he had for grammatical analysis or the linguistic analysis which he provides. But he certainly had some kind of a Nirutti tradition, some kind of a tradition on the science of etymology, which he was using for his commentaries. Now, his ultimate focus, of course, was exposition of the doctrinal points in order to clarify its ultimate essence. I mean, that's what he was aiming at when he is kind of bringing out all this discussion. He is bringing out so many opinions and possible ways of explaining a thing. But then with the help of that, he's also trying to, in the end, clarify what are the doctrinal standpoints of the Mahavihara tradition or the Theravada tradition, so to say. Buddhaghosa is also important because, like a modern philologist or textual scholar, he records variants found in manuscripts accessible to him. So in a way, he is kind of very carefully recording all these variants for us. So this is also quite interesting. Now, if you look at the way or the steps which he takes while explaining a particular sutta, I mean, if you talk about the sutta commentaries, So he first starts his commentary of any sutta with a nidana, introduction. And then he describes the 4 motives of delivering that particular suttas. I mean, as you know, that there are these 4 different motives. We say that, and these are called sutta nikepas. That means the ways in which the sutta is laid down. And these are 4 in number. So they say Attajhasaya, a sutta explained by or given by the Buddha, discourse given by the Buddha. I mean, based on his own intention, own desire, independent of any other condition. The second one is called Parajhasaya, which is a sutta which is given based on the disposition of others. So either noticing the intention of other people, or yeah, I mean, he starts explaining a certain thing. I mean, he starts a discourse. Now that is called Parajhasaya. This is the second Sutta Nikepa. The third one is called Puchavasika. These are the suttas which are delivered as an answer to certain questions. So they I mean, depend on the questions asked by people. And the fourth one is called Atupatika, which is kind of the suttas which are taught on certain occasion, or depending on certain causes and conditions. Then Buddhaghosa explains the suttas by adopting the 3 anusandhis to explain the inner structure of the sutta. Now, anusandhi is basically the development. I mean, this is how Foneniver translates the term. So, anusandhis are basically how the sutta develops. I mean, basically talking about the development of the sutta and the inner connections of different topics or sections of the sutta. Now, sorry, these 3 anusandhis are Puchanusandhi. That means the question, I mean, the developing question. I mean, question used as a development, as a cause of development for a sutta. Then after that, we have Ajhasayanusandhi. That means when a kind of an intention to explain something, or either intention of one's own self or for others, they form a kind of a basis for the further development or the connection of the earlier portion with the following portion. And the third is called Yathanusandhi. This is kind of more natural kind of development where we can also have some kind of digressions or different topics coming up one from the other, and through this the third type of anusandhi called Yathanusandhi. Other principles which govern this, all the Buddhaghosa's commentary, and especially the commentaries which occur like in groups. I mean, like we said, the Vinaya, I mean, the Nikaya commentaries and so on. Buddhaghosa uses this principle. I mean, even in single commentary, he uses this 2 principles of apubba padavannana. That means he explains only those words which he has not explained before. So once he starts, therefore, I mean, what you see in Buddhaghosa's commentaries is that the initial part, these commentaries are really very detailed. But later on, in the later portion, the commentary becomes short because of this principle, because he's not commenting on the words which he has already commented upon. So he will always cross-refer you to this earlier thing, or he will not say anything at all. So that means that he has explained this particular term somewhere, I mean, before already. So one has to go back and see this earlier reference or earlier occurrence of that term. The second principle which he uses is the Anuttana Padavannana. So Uttana Padas means the padas, the words, the meaning of which is very clear. I mean, it is quite clear, evident. So he will not explain those terms, the meaning of which is very clear and it is quite well known. It's kind of popular. So he will only explain those terms which are not so popularly known, which are not so clear. So explaining only those terms which are not so clear. This is another principle. Now this has helped him to really, take care of the volume of the text. Otherwise, with the Tipitaka, as you all know, there are lots of repetitions and so on and so forth. So the commentaries really would have been voluminous. As they already say that when Buddhaghosa completed all his commentaries, when all the older commentaries were burned down, their height was as high as 7 elephants. This is more likely account, but still, one thing which it hints at is that the older commentaries were really voluminous in size, whereas Buddhaghosa's commentaries were more compact because of these two main principles. Another important principle which we see is principle of cross-referencing. Now, we all know that whatever things he has explained in Vishuddhimaga, in all the Nikaya commentaries and later also these other commentaries, they cross-refer to Vishuddhimaga or the other places where it is the same topic has been discussed. Now, this has this reference method of cross-referencing has helped Buddhaghosa to achieve kind of a consistency of explanation and also economy of expression. He could do it in a very standard manner, being consistent so that he is not saying different things at different places. So he's very consistent with what he has said. And lastly, he has kind of also achieved brevity because of this, because he is now then is not required to repeat the same explanation which he has already given in one commentary in the other commentary. Now, if we talk about the Buddhaghosa's own philosophy, there is a question which is discussed by scholars whether what is original in Buddhism, or what is original in Buddhaghosa, or is he simply kind of reiterating the views which are already there? Yes, as we can see that he is basically doing this. He's basically reproducing the material. He's only a translator. He's translating the material, but he's not a very passive translator, because at points he's also expressing his own views, and he's responsible basically for systematizing the material which was already there in the Mahavihara tradition. So he's a systematizer, we can say. And the way he, because as an editor, as we have seen, he was a compiler, he was an editor, and he was a redactor. So as an editor, and as a compiler and the redactor, he had a choice what to accept and what not to accept, right? Which portion to redact and which portion not to redact. So he in a way, though he did not kind of express his own views very boldly, but through this editing work, or through this work as a compiler or as a redactor, he has really shaped the Theravada thought. So whatever we see now as a Theravada is basically what is shaped by Buddha. So we can say it's a Buddhaghosa's philosophy, which we are studying as a Theravada philosophy these days, because he is the one who systemized everything. Buddhaghosa, Buddhaghosa's excellence and law observes, can be seen in his psychological treatment of the philosophy of the Buddhist doctrines. Now, if we go to the next topic, if you look at his literary and scientific contribution, what Buddhaghosa as a commentator contributed to the study of Theravada Buddhism. Now, see, Buddhaghosa's commentary is so rich in sources, in information, that it is really helpful to understand what kind of texts were available, what kind of material was available to him, and what was the kind of commentarial tradition which was before him. Who were the authors? What were the texts? There are so many citations which we find in Buddhaghosa's commentaries that they really help us to map this particular period about which we really know nothing, because we don't really have material based on this. These commentaries also tell us about how this whole exegetical tradition developed in the Pali, or in the Pali tradition, right from the canon up to Buddhaghosa's own commentary. It also tells us the lineage, I mean, the Theravada lineage, because these texts, they also talk about how the texts were handed down. It also gives us glimpses about the oral tradition, the teacher and pupil kind of this Guru Shishya Parampara. It also tells us about that. So it's a very important source to understand this, even the religious history of Buddhism. And one more important thing, like Buddhaghosa, I mean, he, while giving his comments, his glosses, he often gives you lots of lexicographical, I mean, the string of synonyms. So there's a large lexicographical material available in these commentaries. In fact, my teacher, Professor Dharfale, was really fascinated with the Buddhaghosa's style of glosses and so on and so forth. And he, in fact, had expressed a wish that one should really create a dictionary based on Buddhaghosa's own principles, which we find in the commentaries. The way they explain a particular term with the help of citations, with the help of etymological analysis, by way of providing synonyms and so on and so forth. So it's a kind of this, based on these kind of principles which you find in Buddhaghosa's writing, one can really try and attempt to create a new lexicon of Pali. So there's lots of material because all this material which we have in Buddhaghosa, please remember that this is a pre-Amarakosha material in a way. And so we can really learn a lot from Buddhaghosa's writings. Apart from this, I mean, Buddhaghosa's commentaries has lots of information about the history, geography, about biological information, where he talks about your body limbs and the Pratikula Sanya and so on. He explains human anatomy and so on and so forth. So, I mean, there are these other topics, lots of information about the cultural history of India and Ceylon, and about so many different topics that it is a very interesting reading just to study Buddhaghosa's commentaries. So this is another advantage of Buddhaghosa's commentary and its strength. Now we'll come to the last topic of my talk today, and this is about the modern scholarship. I already started with my talk with this initial work in the field of Buddhaghosa studies, I should say. Now, what we have seen, I mean, how these studies have developed in last century. And last century, and even the second half of the 19th century. So what we see is basically in the initial phase of the work on Buddhaghosa was in the form of editions and translations of Buddhaghosa's works. Unfortunately, I mean, there's no translation available of the Vinaya commentaries. We only have the Bahira Nidana translated into English by Jaya Vikrama. But apart from that, the other two commentaries, I mean, they're not translated. Vishuddhimaga is, of course, translated. As we all know, it's only thing which is also available in Hindi. The other commentaries are not available. Recently, actually, Angara Chaudhary ji, Dr. Angara Chaudhary has translated the Sutta Nipata commentary, Paramattha Jyotika into Hindi, that is available. But apart from that, I mean, we have the Abhidharma Commentaries were translated into English by scholars. But apart from that, the Nikaya commentaries like Sumangala Vilasini, Papancha Sudani, etc., these are not translated. Bhikkhu Bodhi has translated some selected suttas with Atakata and Tikas. So that is one thing which is accessible to us. But I mean, and Dhammapada Atakata and Jaṭā Katha, of course, they have been translated into English and also available in Hindi. That's it. That's the situation about the edition and translation. But most of texts have been now edited. They're available in editions, Roman as well as Nagari editions. And we also have wonderful indices there. Actually, I mean, scholars like Soda Mori and Toichi Endo, they've also kind of prepared an index, parallel index of the commentary material, which is a very useful thing. Apart from that, now, of course, I mean, Buddhaghosa has been discussed in the book of history on Pali literature. So K.R. Norman, Oscar von Hinüber, then K.L. Hazra. I mean, he has also written a book on the commentators. Rajesh Ranjan has also written a book on this same theme in past few years. But I mean, the important scholars who have studied Buddhaghosa seriously, I mean, include K.R. Norman, of course, Oscar von Hinüber, Soda Mori, Toichi Endo, and Petra Kiefer-Pils. I mean, these are the leading scholars. You should look at their works and in order to get more information on the topic. Now, the main focus was of the initial research on Buddhaghosa, as I said, was basically focus on the authorship of Buddhaghosa, of these different works assigned to him. Then the structure and the sources of Buddhaghosa's commentaries. I mean, these were the initial focus. Later on, with scholars like O.H. Pind and even K.R. Norman, who were basically linguists, I mean, they talked about the syntactic and grammatical analysis of Buddhaghosa. So we have K.R. Norman talking about the Margarisms in Buddhaghosa's writings. Then Oscar von Hinüber also wrote about Pali phonetics in Buddhaghosa's writings. O.H. Pind and Alistair Gornell had discussed grammatical discussions in Buddhaghosa's commentary. I mean, O.H. Pind especially has done wonderful research on this topic. Recently, Maria Heim, I mean, she has worked on the phenomenology and the psychological perspective of Buddhaghosa's writing. So she is kind of understanding Buddhaghosa from a totally different perspective. And she is showing how Buddhaghosa's approach to many of these practices, I mean, the practice of the Brahma Viharas or the practice of meditative practices, how they are kind of phenomenological in nature, and how they are really connected with positive psychology. So, I mean, she is really doing some wonderful work, which actually I find very interesting. And I think those who are really interested in knowing more about it should really refer to Maria Heim and her writings. Janardhan Ganeri, he is interested in establishing Buddhaghosa as a philosopher. So, I mean, in this handbook of Indian philosophy volume published from Oxford, I mean, he has authored an article establishing Buddhaghosa as a philosopher, propounding analytical philosophy and phenomenology. So, I mean, these are some of the new directions in which the modern research on Buddhaghosa is proceeding. I mean, Oscar von Hinüber in his writing on Buddhaghosa has really indicated several more areas where the more research is still possible. And I think now scholars and students like you should really now take up this issue seriously, and should really decide some topic for your PhD or MPhil research, wherein you actually focus your attention on the commentaries. And this is really an area which can offer you lots of material and lots of interesting material, and you will be really able to contribute a lot to the field of Buddhist studies. So I think with this, I'll stop my bit prolonged talk on the issue. And if possible, I think we can have some question and answers. If I don't know how the organizers are doing this, but we can certainly do this if you wish. Yeah. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Devkar sir. It was really a detailed exposition, starting with the life and career of Buddhaghosa, going up to his style and structure, giving us insights into how the works of Buddhaghosa are so important to be studied. I'm sure that participants also must be eager to share their thoughts or maybe having some questions. You can raise your hand or you can write in the chat box.
No questions?
It seems there are no questions there.
I think people are still digesting. Let's give them a few moments.
Either it was too good or it was too.
No, it was very enriching, sir. A massive sweep through, the various aspects of Buddhaghosha's work. So maybe while people are, yes, somebody is asking. Or?
Yeah. Hello, my name is Ashish,
Yes.
and I have one question to
Yes.
Mahesh sir. So,
please.
according to you, sir, what is means we have these commentaries and Atakatas for almost centuries with us. So, in your opinion, what is the difficulty and why we have not translated this into Indian languages? Because we find the commentaries in the English available, but then what is the reason we have not got it translated into Indian languages? What is the reason behind it?
I mean, you see, I mean, translating the commentaries is not an easy job. I mean, it really requires lots of good, training in philology, in the language itself. And I mean, you see, not just Indian languages, but even the commentaries were translated lately even into English. So the initial focus was on the canonical text. And now in case of Indian languages, I mean, we haven't even translated fully the canonical text. So commentaries is still a kind of a next step. And as I said, I mean, we really require good scholarship, I mean, the sound knowledge of the language, and which is unfortunately, I mean, after that generation of Rahul Sankrityan and Jagdish Kashyap and Anand Fausalan and like Mahesh Tiwari and so on. We really need to kind of develop that kind of scholarship who can take up this challenge. I mean, in the recent years, I only know Angara Chaudhary ji, who is kind of translating Sutenipada Atakata, I mean, who has translated already, and he's already working on the Theravada and Therigata Atakata. One aspect, I mean, of this language is one difficulty, and second thing is also the vocabulary used in Atakatas is also quite unique and interesting. I mean, mostly Buddhaghosha's vocabulary is covered in the modern dictionaries, but I mean the later commentaries, their vocabulary not really also included in modern dictionaries. That is one more difficulties. And in order to study Atakatas and in order to translate them, one should again have one should also study the tikas, anutikas, abhinavatikas, and so on. I mean, so it really required lots of work, and this commentaries are, I mean, their volume is quite big. I mean, so I mean, Jayavikrama translated the Bahini Nidana. It is more narrative in style, so he could do this. Bahira Nirana of the it has also been translated in the Jaṭā Atakata has been translated, we know. But apart from that, I mean, we don't really have people are kind of attempting this because of the technicality involved in the commentaries, and commentary translation is not so easy. It's very technical and sometimes also can become dry. So those who are really interested in that kind of stuff, can embark on this thing, but otherwise it's very difficult. But it would be really very useful if you could translate the commentaries. I think just now, as somebody has put in the chat box, but I mean, the thing is that like Bhikkhu Bodhi's scholarship is there, his commitment is there, and we, unfortunately, to be very frank, we don't really have that kind of competence and commitment here. So somehow we need scholars who have that kind of competence and commitment. So I now, some of you can really take up this challenge seriously and can start working on this. I mean, even small components like Bhikkhu Bodhi and wonderfully did this commentaries just on one sutta each. I mean, just one sutta, like Mula Panyasa, Pannasa, or Brahmajala and things like this. I mean, one can also do things like this. But I mean, let me tell you that we really need to master the language in order to translate the Atakatas. I mean, for the original text, you have English translations, Hindi translation, so one can really rely on them and translate. But in order to Atakatas, I mean, you are more independent. You don't really have any aid for you to translate this, so one has to rely on one's own knowledge and understanding of the commentaries. Yeah, so there'll be not much aid in terms of dictionary material or ready English translations and so on and so forth. So yeah, one has to really strive hard.
Hello, so my name is here, and I would like to hear something about Venerable Nyanamoli and how he translated Buddhaghosa's work. Can you say a few words about Venerable Nyanamoli's translation of Buddhaghosa?
I mean, it's very difficult to say, but I mean, you should read his own. I mean, his introduction, actually, which is a wonderful introduction, which he has given. So, I mean, reading that would really give you a nice, a good idea about how he's doing this. But let me tell you, I mean, all these scholars who translated Buddhaghosa, I mean, they also have a wonderful, I mean, philological background. So, I mean, that is something which is really important to have. And Nyanamoli, I mean, he's a very sound scholar, and I think he has really done a wonderful job. He revised also these earlier translations, and now his translation is much more reliable than the earlier translations of the Abhidharma text. Yeah.
Asa, may I ask a question?
Yes, please.
I was wondering about the Vishuddhimaga. Do we have a clear affiliation established for that text?
Yes.
To which
Yeah.
school? Is it Abhayagiriya or is it?
Yeah, it's a Abhayagiri text. And actually, I mean, sometime, I mean, in Vishuddhimaga, he kind of refers to some opinions and saying kechi, some. Yes. And actually, the commentator later on, I mean, say that he's referring to the Vimuktimaga. Yeah. So, I mean, not just modern scholarship, but even in the tradition, I mean, it is in a way acknowledged that Buddhaghosa is basically responding to that tradition. I mean, that text, and which belong to the Abhayagiri tradition. And I mean, because this has been, I mean, Peter Skilling has also written on this, and for the old, I mean, we already have Bapat and who has already written on this, and Hirakawa. Hirakawa, they wrote on the Samanta Pasarika, but I mean, for the Vimuktimaga, we have some of these nice publications, and Bapat's own study, and also Peter Skilling and others have written on this topic.
I see. And do we know anything at all about Buddhaghosa's school affiliation when he was in India? Do any of them, or is it just?
No, I mean, as I said, we don't really have much. Yes, I mean, he's associated with these people like Venerable Revata and this Jyotipala and Buddhamitta in South India. So, but I mean, he criticizes Andakas. So certainly he did not belong to those. So Andakas are basically, so the Andrakas, right? Andhra Buddhists, and so he himself kind of say that he's a Theravada affiliation. But it seems that one more interesting thing is that the same Theravadins, it seems that this was the opinion which was expressed by some scholars, that the Theravadins in the mainland Theravadins, these are the Mahishasakas and because there is one Buddhadeva who is kind of associated also with requesting Buddhaghosa to kind of write one of the commentaries, and he is said to be the Mahishasaka monk in the tradition. But I mean, apart from that, we don't really have much about Buddhaghosha's own writing. And I mean, you you must have seen this article by Rupert Gettin, where they say, "Is Buddhaghosa Theravada?" Right, and so basically, now because before Buddhaghosa, I mean, there was not much. I mean, there was nothing much like a Theravada. So in fact, what Buddhaghosa systematized kind of became a Theravada, so to say. So I mean, yeah, I mean, apart from that, we don't have much on this.
Right. Thank you.
So, so on a personal level, which book do you really like? Would you prefer Vishuddhimaga or Buddhaghosha? Just
Sorry,
Yeah,
can you please
so-
repeat? I mean, your voice was breaking. I could not hear you properly.
Sure. So on a personal level, which book do you prefer? Upanishads, Vishuddhimaga, or Buddhaghosha's Vishuddhimaga?
I mean, in terms of preference of what? I mean, in terms of like as a practice guide or something like this. I mean, we look at it mainly as a text and the study of the text. So from textual point of view, of course, both are at the equal level. I mean, we don't really have much of Vishuddhimaga available to us. It is really in the form of translations. But yeah, I mean, Vishuddhimaga, of course, being more close to us as it is available in Pali, we have studied that text. But I mean, apart from that, I don't really have anything to say on like choosing one over the other. I mean, there are differences of opinion sometimes, but more or less the model is, the basic model is the same in the two texts. So I don't know. I haven't really studied Vishuddhimaga that deeply, so I just seen some kind of preliminary glances on it. So it's very difficult to comment on this. Yeah, and there was somebody also who asked a question like whether Theravada is a Hinayana, and I mean, in terms of terminology, when we say Hinayana and Mahayana, I mean these are used in a different context, right? So when the Mahayana schools, they talk about the higher vehicle, the bigger, the larger vehicle, they use the term Hinayana. And by Hinayana, basically they are referring to all the Shravakayana and the Pratyeka Buddhayana schools. So, I mean, from that point of view, yes, Theravada would be being a Shravakayana text. It can be classed as a Hinayana, but the Theravadins themselves, they don't really use this terminology of Hinayana and Mahayana. So for them, it is a Theravada is a orthodox tradition. It is a most serious and tradition which is very close to the original teachings of the Buddha and so on. So I mean, so they don't really use this terminology. It is the Mahayana schools who use this terminology, but that too in the context of the Bodhisattvayana versus Shravakayana and Pratyeka Buddhayana. Yeah, so Vipassana technique is from the Theravada. That's correct. But please note that even in the Mahayana text, also we talk about Vipassana. So I mean, again, to use a word, if you're, I mean, I presuppose that you're using the word Vipassana technique in the context of the Vipassana taught by S. N. Goenka-ji and others. So, but I mean, the term as a term, as a mode of practice is common to all of Buddhism. So we can also find it in the Yogacara, in the Madhyamaka, and the other schools. Now, what kind of, I mean, how they do the Vipassana and what kind of methodology, that's a different question. But the term as a Samatha and Vipassana are common to all the schools of Buddhism. I mean, the Mahayana technique of meditation, I mean, you have to really go and learn with masters. I haven't learned it, so to say. So I can't really say much on this. But in the Mahayana, of course, the focus is more on on discerning the nairatmya, I mean, the anatma, rather than the impermanence. So their focus is more on the anatma rather than the impermanence, which is focus in the Theravada style of Vipassana. Yeah, but if you ask any Tibetan master, they will say that yes, they also do Vipassana and they also do the Shamatha. So no, there's no similarity with the Patanjali Yoga. Of course, there are a few things. So I mean, in fact, the Patanjali Yoga, the Samadhi being the ultimate goal, is criticized even in the Mahayana school. So this Chitta Nirodha as the final attempt is criticized. I mean, in the Mahayana tradition, we talk about different levels of meditation, different bhumis we talk about, but they are not the same as Patanjali Yoga. Anyway. Yes.
Actually, Bhante Dhammadeepa is currently teaching on Wednesday evenings, and we've uploaded the teachings on YouTube. He's worked on a translation of one of the manuals ascribed to Kumar Jiva. And he's basically showing, I mean, you know, Bhante, how he teaches, he's contextualizing it with Pali Abhidharma, Vasubandhu's Abhidharma Kosha, and also bringing in how in the early tradition of meditation, Kumar Jiva brings in Bodhisattva ideas. So it's quite interesting to see that transition in the praxis.
Yeah. Good. So, are there any other questions? Otherwise, should we stop here? Or?
Yes, I think so, Bhaktishri.
Yes, if there are no more questions, I request Dr. Karuna Jadhav to present vote of thanks.
Yeah, so let me first thank all of you for organizing this. Supriya, Bhagyashri, and Gautam, and Karuna, and the entire team there. So thank you very much. And thank you also to all those who have registered and participated in today's talk. Yeah, thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of KJ Somaiya of Dharma Studies, I would like to thank you for your very thought-provoking lecture on life and works of Buddhaghosa. I'm again thankful to you for accepting our invitation to deliver this lecture. My heartiest thanks to all the participants who are present over here and taking active part in question and answer.
Thank you, Deokar sir.
Thank you.
I am also happy to express my vote of thanks to those who have directly and indirectly contributed to this lecture.
Thank you, Deokar sir. Ambike.
Thank you.
Okay.